Roxanne, thank you for joining me. Talk about commitments versus plans. Um, I think it's a very important conversation. I look at the founding fathers of the United States. They didn't have a plan. They had a commitment, and they acted upon that commitment in accordance to how the crown and the crown's representatives, well, and the other crowns that were involved as well, because it wasn't just the English crown, trying to get a piece of that action. Um, what they had, the founding fathers of America, was a firm commitment to restoring English sovereignty to themselves. And then what came out of that looked like plans was really actually their responding to how the crowns and how their representatives responded to that commitment. And that's why when we look back at the way in which the war came about, the way it initiated, how it played out, et cetera, why it took years for us to, get to some place like it looked like we were winning, is that the crowns and their representatives were testing our resolve to the commitment. And that takes time, an immense amount of effort. And we then had to go through that again and prove our commitment in 1812, in the War of 1812. And then we had to prove our commitment yet again 50 years later in the Civil War. We had to prove our commitment again in the beginning of the financial war that started at the end of the Gilded Age. Unfortunately, I believe very much that we failed to demonstrate our commitment to retaining our sovereignty starting sometime around, just before World War One. So it wasn't a plan, right? It was, we demonstrated a commitment over a century and a half to individual sovereignty.
Yeah. Um, and I think it's important to um, look at, we were just talking off camera about the difference between um, the plan and an agenda.
Yeah.
Um, because to me, there's a distinction. Most people, especially people from the military, think of a plan as, the typical strategic objectives, the operational objectives, and the
The
tactical
yeah,
objectives.
the op
And
order. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, and so if you look at the agenda that these people had of playing out to this basic one world global order, um, it boils down to your point, the commitment of the sovereign people of whether or not we're going to allow them to um, imprint their agenda on us.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think we've
And
emphatically, collectively decided we're not going to do that.
I agree with that. I think, unfortunately, though, just because I had conversations with some guys this weekend and solid guys, but I keep hearing people, so there's the phrase that Langley rolled out, or Madison Avenue folks probably on behalf of Langley, conspiracy theory, right? As a way to discredit anybody who's digging deep into something. Well, I think trust the plan is also Madison Avenue Langley marketing to get us to think about plans versus commitment. Because if we're all paying it, if we are all thinking that one, we're up against people, these extraordinarily capable, wealthy, fully committed people, and against their plan, like they've got some formal master plan, and it's not more that they have an agenda that they're adapting their modular component plans to on one side, so as long as we think we're up against the plan, well, most people aren't going to get involved until they understand what the plan is so that we can plan against their plan. But that doesn't work. This isn't where we are, is not, and where we've been since the very beginning, right? Since the 1600s, really. And this goes back to England before there ever was even American colonies, etc. Is we are in a place where the only way we get through is we fully commit to restoring sovereignty And then we demonstrate, we act upon that commitment. And if there's little planning and things we need to do, well, we're actually just like the enemy, the resentfuls, because we're also pulling component pieces of things off the table that work in the law and in the courts and in the banks and in the economy and in social system, right? So, and that's what the enemy's doing as well. Now, there are somewhat playbooks, that we can use, kind of guidelines, really, less than plans. But I keep hearing people, well, trust the plan, or there is a plan. And it's like, no, 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 no. There is a commitment, at least amongst a subset of our true elites, to restore individual sovereignty.
True. And there, I I think it's important to um delineate that, because again, we're talking about terminology, and I think terminology is so important, because it's how we communicate with each other.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so, is there, and I'm going to ask you this question, is there, do you view that the Trump administration has that level of commitment?
Yes. Yes. They're all
And
in. Hmm.
yes. And so, what I struggle with is the commitment from the at the tactical level, which is us, because that's the strategic
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
We can't even get people to make the commitment to get off of like big banks um, tits. We can't. You still have today people that are patriots that are banking at Bank of America.
Yeah.
And those are, to me, everybody's like, well, what do we do? Well, you clearly understand, the people that listen to us, that there's these nefarious players up there, and you can personally, you and your family, have the commitment to get out of their system. Like, I've almost completely separated myself from every aspect of that. I bank locally. Um, I don't buy my food at grocery stores anymore. About the only thing I get at a grocery store is paper towels and toilet paper. I mean, I buy locally. So that's the level of commitment. I mean, I buy, half a cow at a time now.
Yeah.
And if you get out of their system, if you have the fortitude and the commitment that's necessary, um, to see this thing through, you can take those steps. You need to empower yourself. Um, and I when I first got off active duty and realized that all of this nefarious crap was going on, I was amazed at how there really isn't any structure for the people that do have that commitment, and now the knowledge that of who these nefarious players are, because more and more of them come to light every day, that they wouldn't even make the personal commitment to empower themselves, and they keep looking for that outside.
They're looking for a plan. They want somebody to give them a plan. But when you're dealing with this type of enemy, the resentfuls, there is no plan that's going to work because they've co-evolved with us forever. And they, give me 1 second. Their commitment in every aspect of their life, every moment of their life, is all in. And they're playing with the house's money. They don't care. It's not their money. They've hijacked systems. They will burn, institutions. They will burn the institution to the ground. They don't care. It's not their institution. They're just using it because we're letting them. And they are, again, playing with house money. So their commitment to complete, total, and absolute enslavement, because that's exactly what this is. This is a slaver mind, right? The resentful's mind. And they're all in every minute of every day. And they could burn everything to the ground. It wouldn't matter because they didn't create or invent or build anything. what we so point being is that they don't necessarily need a plan. Now they got to do a little put pull some things off the shelves, some fuckery mechanisms, kind of like Legos, and put them together into something that functions. I like Lincoln Logs a little bit more, but I'm older guy than the Legos. Legos too complicated now. But they aren't. It's not like Okay, so let's use COVID. Did they have a plan? No, they had an agenda. They had an agenda, and they had a bunch of different people working on different things, different pieces, different components, and they called it
201 something.
correct. They had an agenda, and then they just acted upon what they were able to get away with. Why? Because on our side, we suspect, we think, and again, off the camera, you made a brilliant point. When I arrived in A11, we had plans and contingency plans. Everything worked out in detail. Did we ever use them? Oh, and by the way, have we won any war with all of our complex plans over the last 80 years?
So that's what, and that's kind of the joke. If you're ever in a planning function in the
Yeah.
military, is the plan works until the first bullet
Till the
flies.
first of, yeah, yeah, yeah. Or until a resentful just goes, oh, I see what your plan is. I'm just going to go do this over here.
Yeah.
Right? That's unconventional, irregular warfare. That's real warfare.
And
Right? Is do the unexpected.
that is definitely where we're at.
Yes.
And that's what I said to him off camera that the first time I was actually at a joint command and went into the planning directorate,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there's just binders everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
plan
Yeah.
for this and a plan for that. And other than training exercises, which you use the plans for,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can tell you after 9/11, because I was at U.S. Central Command, we didn't go pull a binder off the wall.
Or
And
even two or three of them and combine them together.
no,
Yeah.
no, we didn't do
Yeah.
any of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, it was something completely not planned because our war plans basically required the CENTCOM staff to pick up and go forward. We were
Yeah.
going to Qatar.
Yeah.
That's why we spent, hundreds of millions of dollars building that command
Yeah.
center forward. Did our four-star go forward? No, no, he didn't. He stayed at MacDill Air Force Base, and we brought an entire coalition village of
Yeah.
all of those countries to MacDill, and no one planned for that. There was
Yeah.
not a plan.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's the reality of the world.
Yes.
And I I don't think any of us now, do I think there's a timetable of certain events needing to happen at certain times? I definitely think that's the case. Um, but I I think that's kind of the problem with the expectations now because people have bought into this um, plan narrative, and when you look at there's a sequence I think that's very important if you're going to. But I think that's the frustrating part for most people is they see things happening, but they don't see the big picture. And if you don't stay, outside of that bubble, it's almost impossible to make sense of all the different actions that are happening at the tactical level. And that's what I try to do is to zoom out and look at the different things, playing the part that I find that I can play in this whole um, uh, current situation that we're in. Um, it's very interesting to me that you because there's so many aspects of it, and I think especially the narrative, to your point about the Madison Avenue people,
Yeah. Yeah.
um I don't think people understand the role, and I didn't fully understand it, even though I know about educationally about psychological operations and how
Yeah.
those play out. But until I started doing all of this really in-depth research, I had no idea how important the whole PR piece of this is, and how many of the key people that have operated post World War II are actually from PR firms.
Yes.
It is a fertile recruiting tool for the CIA to
Yeah.
have PR people. I
Yes.
was shocked at that, because they do such a, um, uh, and that's, I would love to get your take on this, because
Mm.
you know a lot more about this at the tactical level than I do. That the psychological, piece of this whole thing, um, I'm interested in your take on how effective you feel where we're at right now. If you had to evaluate, because I think there's a counter psychological operation going on as
Oh yeah.
well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Um,
Well, there's
and
factions and all of that as well. So yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
Yeah. So in the book, The Eternal War, one of the doctrinal lines is reality. And one of the things the resentfuls are doing, the two main factions and then the sub factions within, is they're always warping reality. They're always creating an artificial reality tunnel that every time we think we're breaking free of the artificial reality tunnel, we're just in another branch of it, right? And how is that maintained? Well, that's maintained through factionality, because each faction has a different, a slightly different orientation, or even a dramatically different orientation on reality, what reality is. And so what do they do? They invest constantly in untold number of reality, sub-branching realities to the same base, though, reality tunnel. And that's aliens, and that's, Satanists, and that's, advanced, super advanced technologies. And, there's all kinds of, and things under the Giza Plateau. And, so there's this ludicrous amount of, sub-branching realities, but they're, for the most part, they're all artificial. And they both, what they do in their own way is they keep us, the humans are pattern recognition systems. And so you get somebody going, following the white rabbit in the waistcoat, who's actually one of my favorite characters in all literature, because he gets you to the Mad Hatter, and the Mad Hatter is the only one telling the truth. That's why he's mad, right? Um, which applies to what we're talking about. But uh, all of these sub-branching, realities, however, all still support the fundamental, concept and idea of reality, that there's some greater power system structure that you just don't know about. And if you just work harder and put more energy into it, you're going to find more, and you're going to learn more. And finally, you're going to break free from this, overarching artificial reality tunnel. The truth of the matter is, and I've got to give this, at least from what I see. So that's one of the doctrinal lines of effort in their Eternal War. I got to give some things respect to Chomsky, Noam Chomsky, at least when he was talking about linguistics. All that other stuff, he got bought and owned early on, right? But when Chomsky's early work in linguistics is absolutely solid stuff, which is why they went after him and, converted him, and etc. The old Greeks talked about this as well. There's only 13 storylines available to the human mind. And the archetypes in each storyline are exactly the same. However, based off of the base storyline, that archetype could either be the antagonist or protagonist, depending on which overarching reality tunnel you're living in, right? That resonates most clearly with you. And we can understand the primary storylines that are somewhat adjacent to us, but the storylines on the other side, that go around the spectrum, we can't understand those at all. We can't understand the same archetype that we are, that's in one of these other fundamentally different reality tunnels, these storylines. is so foreign to us that we don't understand it at all. We think we do because we think we're operating within the same reality tunnel, and we're not. Well, that's all been known for thousands of years. The Greeks quite literally talked about it when they were talking about drama and comedies and, et cetera. Neuroscience is also demonstrating this to be true also, right? That the archetypes are very solid, they're neural wiring, and that there are different narratives that, different neural wiring systems resonate more with than others. And that has far more to do with genetics than it does, nurture. Because also, who nurtured you? The people with your same genetics, right? So these things are very important. The final point in this, though, is at a certain point, however, there's too many branches off the base reality. The base reality, in order for it to be, the artificial reality, in order for it to be sustained, it's become so complex that humans just can't maintain it anymore. So it's not even that necessary that it'll break at some point. It breaks down, and for English, it's about every 400 years. It's a little bit different for other ethnic group peoples. And it does seem to be very linguistically based, but about every 400 years, the English-speaking peoples, or what will become the English-speaking peoples, we just can't maintain the complexity of the artificial reality tunnel anymore, and it just starts breaking down on its own. Well, what happens? The chaos agents who survive, thrive off of the artificial reality tunnel, they double down, quadruple down, right? They do everything they can to try and, shore up and patch up, like the Dutch boy in the dike, right? To try and keep the existing artificial reality tunnel going. But it fails. Ultimately, it fails, and it fails in either a civil war or a big, external conflagration kind of war. So, and we're there, by the way. We're at that level of complexity. Yeah.
And that's interesting because, again, what I have realized is they know that.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And they've exploited it.
Oh, yes.
If you go and look at the first step in all of these operations is the survey teams.
Yes.
They go into a country and they do their survey
Yep.
of the people.
Yep.
And they do it under various mechanisms, but it is the first step in figuring out who's in what reality and who is,
Is
and they
what
know
archetype and what? Yeah. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
and they know psychologically the profile that are the easiest to prey upon. And that was a fascinating discovery for me too. That like and the mechanisms that they use women, they use youth, that are part of their system to go in because they blend in and no one ever suspects them. And they basically dissect the
Yeah.
community and they know
It's the
exactly.
Jesuits.
Uh,
It's the Jesuits. It's where we learned it from. And this is, Frank Herbert, right? Terribly sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but Frank Herbert
no,
wrote
that's fine.
about this as the missionary protectiva of the Bene Gesserit. Herbert talked about this across all five of, the books that he wrote. It's the missionary protectiva. How do you go in there? How do you assess in a non-threatening way? Well, it's usually religion or something ideologically based. And then you carefully, subtly understand, okay, for this people, what is the primary narrative arcs? And then how do the archetypes play out in those different narrative arcs? And then let's go find the ones that we can influence in this
Yes.
ways. And then when we need to come in, there might or might not be certain schoolhouses that some of us go to and a certain kind of work we do, including a SMU, right? Special Mission Unit, that's its sole purpose.
Yes.
Give me 1 second. Once you have that mapped out, then depending on what action you need to do later there in that country and that group of people or a subset of people within a country, then you shift to one of the 3 or 4 main story arc lines and archetypes that you need to get the action and the reaction you need. And you don't know ahead. And this gets back to plan, right? This isn't a plan. This is a methodology. And then when you need to use what you've developed, Then you might put a quick little jot down kind of tactical plan that's only going to, be valid for as long as you run the operation, and then you're going to get counters, et cetera, right? But it's a methodology that's used to meet the requirements of the agenda. And the only planning that's in there is when you need to go do something very specific and you got to fund it, and you got to send somebody, et cetera. But it's not some overarching plan, because you don't know, we don't know exactly. And I'll use the example, it's a non-threatening one. Let's say that we'll use Iran and what just happened there. Let's say we've got an isolated person in a country and we need to retrieve them. And we can't send in the whole giant package like we just did in Iran, right? Well, it's not necessarily always that you're putting this, you're doing this kind of mapping and using this kind of methodology to do something nefarious. It might be because on the other side, you need to retrieve somebody, or you might need a mechanism to extract somebody from that country, that community, et cetera, who's a very solid person, and you want to prepare them and train them up, and, et cetera, et cetera. So again, though, it's not a plan. There's a methodology. There's an agenda you're trying to overall accomplish. And then when something happens that you need to use some resources, human or otherwise, usually human, and there's always a human involved, when you need to utilize those resources, then you jot down a quick little plan of how you're going to initiate that. And then from there, it's just action, reaction, counter reaction, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's how the enemy works. That's how when we're doing this right, like the founding fathers that's founded this country and then fought it out and proved their, commitment, that's how that really works. But what do we keep hearing about? Well, trust the plan, or there's a plan, or he's got a plan. They've got a plan. No, they got a commitment. They got methodologies, because we live in a very complex world. Ludicrously complex world. We're living within these story arcs, and we're dealing with the archetypes in these story arcs, and that's all a big complicated mess. And you could try to do a plan. Good luck. Right?
Yeah.
So
how do you see this working from a strategic level right now in the United States?
Please ask the question a little more. I don't know exactly what you mean, or ask
So,
what you're asking.
so how would you assess the commitment in the United States right now, as far as where we're at? Because that's one of the things that I look at. Obviously, we understand kind of conceptually where some of these different frictions lines are here. And do you I actually believe this. I believe that there are things happening right now where our commitment to pushing back on this agenda is being assessed.
Yes.
So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, okay. So, two great questions, right? One, I don't believe our commitment as a people, and you're never going to get all the people, et cetera. You need 7 to 10%. That's what we need, right? But not even, and you need them from every social class. Can't be just one social class or the other, because it doesn't work. And yes, people, there are social classes, and yes, they're hardwired mostly. Give me 1 second. I don't believe we're at the 7 to 10% commitment that we need. I don't believe we are. I keep hearing too many people talking plans. This isn't about plan. This is about commitment. The enemy's going to adapt. Whatever plan we have, the enemy has already demonstrated that they're going to shift and adjust and do something else, because they don't have a plan. They have an agenda, and they are all in, and they've been all in forever. Okay, so that's the first part. I'm not sure we have enough people committed. We are being, again, going back, I think I said this earlier, but The United States of America came into being because the greatest empire on the world and several other empires tested our resolve. And they tested our resolve to a point to where there were men freezing to death outside of Valley Forge, but they held. There were, half of the founding fathers lost everything. Many of them lost their lives, and those that lost everything never got it back. Not a single one. I don't think there's a single one. All of that was the testing of the resolve and the commitment of what would become the American people. That happened over years, and it was at that level. That had already been happening for 20 years before that. The resolve testing had been happening for 20 years before that. So give me 1 second. You are absolutely correct. Our resolve is being tested, but it's also the Madison Avenue folks, because that really is where, the high, well, in London, I can't remember the equivalent in London either, because there's the Madison Avenue equivalent in London that's even far older. Give me a second. Some Whitehall folks probably, but our ability to form a resolve is also being heavily influenced with all the psychological operations and all of the deception operations to keep us from seeing that we need to stop thinking there's a plan, and we need to be resolved that no matter what this takes, and no matter how long it takes, and no matter what it costs us personally, we must see this through. Not we want to, or that would be nice, or hey, cool if we can do it. No, no, no. We are at the very same place the founding fathers were in the 1700s. We either hold and we demonstrate our resolve across probably the next all generations alive today, or they will win. And they will act upon what they have openly stated, and that is our eradication. Look what they're doing in Ireland right now as we speak. Look what they're doing in the United Kingdom. Look what they're still trying to do here, and they are still kind of getting away with it because, again, I don't know about these numbers of people get moved out of the country. I'm not sure I trust them, because my entire neighborhood now, and this is not a poor man's neighborhood, is people who barely speak English or not at all. And they get switched out about every 6 months. Somebody's paying for that. And they come here with virtually nothing. They leave here BMWs and Cadillacs and nice things. So we are in a winner take all, genuinely life or death fight. And we have to be resolved as the founding fathers were, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes. We will do what we must. We will adapt. We will shift. We will adjust, but we will defeat their agenda. But we need more people. And the thing that's keeping us from getting more people into that place of all out resolve is two things. One, the psyops. And then the other one is I'm almost absolutely 100% assured that this trust the plan bro thing was intentional psyop to keep us thinking about plans. Plans. Is there a plan? Is there not a plan? Are we on the plan? When plans don't matter. Right now, again, you got to have a little plan to do little things, but everything's just shifting, adjusting, and et cetera. And they're not going to test your resolve by keep running up against your plan. They're going to test your resolve by doing things that invalidate your plan. Right? It's like the Maginot Line. The Germans didn't test the French resolve by going after the Maginot Line. They went right around it.
So if what I find fascinating about this is that because I want to dig a little bit deeper on this assessment piece of
Yes.
the resolve, the commitment.
Yeah.
Um, I so if what is happening is what I think is happening, in that as as we try to dismantle the system, for example, and this is what I found fascinating, um, and I'd love your assessment of this. The um, just watching the reaction to the Venezuelan operation. Okay, so we're this obviously was a node that needed to be taken out. Okay, and you have the reaction of the populace that I believe was being assessed as that operation was unfolding.
Yes.
And there are people who immediately had a visceral reaction to it. And I'm sure that that was being assessed. There were other people that were much more strategic in their thinking as far as their reaction to how that was not just how it was going to unfold, but what was the um, thinking behind doing that when it was done. And I, that's what I feel. It's not like I think we're being tested, but I think these events are part of Trump's commitment to his mission. And as they're unfolding, I almost get the feeling that the manner in which they're happening and the sequence in which they're happening is by a design, and they could be sped up or delayed based on assessing where we're all at.
Right. So goes back to exactly what I said. When we are doing advanced force operations in a country, we're mapping all of these things out, and we have to test that excuse me, before we're, looking to actually do an operation there or to use them to help us in an operation somewhere else. We have to do some loyalty testing, and we have to do some assessments. Or, is our analysis of all the players really true? Because anybody's run human sources, particularly the high-end human sources, you never quite know, right? Um, so before we may have a plan if we want to use these people in this area and their resources to go impact this other thing over here, but we need to do a hard assessment of whether they're the right ones, or maybe it's the same right people, same right country, same right basic resources, capabilities, etc. But we need to use this other story arc network of people, because for right now, with what's happened over here and over here, this is the better group of people to use as opposed to maybe our preferred people, etc. So that assessment is constantly going on. You're also, though, having to constantly assess, and again, I get back to the loyalty testing, because that's really what a loyalty test is. It is a commitment assessment. Who you are, how committed are you, and who and what are you actually really committed to, right? It's a loyalty test. You have to do that assessment both externally and internally. Your your supporters, your peers, and your adversaries are all doing the same thing at the same time also. This is also why plans, and when, the second Declaration of Independence, for all intents and purposes, has already been stated by J.D. Vance and Trump at Davos and in other forums. So the second Declaration of Independence has already been stated. Now there is no plan. Now it's assessment, counter-assessment, action, counteraction. All of that's being assessed, right? So I think maybe the follow-on thought there to what you're asking in a deeper question is this a pruning away that is leading to something substantive?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking.
Right. And the answer to that is absolutely. And we're probably, now everything accelerates towards the end, but we're probably not going to get to that something till sometime in the 2030s. Now, we may have things that look like it before that, but if we just follow this, let's just keep this in the assessment and of commitment, because that's what we are assessing. And it's not just the level of commitment again, it's what are you actually committed to, right? Yeah. So as we're looking at this, as we and again, the enemy always has a say, and the enemy's always got factions, and we also have factions amongst ourselves, and we've also got peers at every social class that's are competing with one another as well. Even if they're committed to the same thing, they're still trying to better. Us monkeys, we're a wild, crazy bunch, right? Um, when we look at the shaping up, so let's use what happened in Hungary yesterday, which personally I don't believe that was a legitimate election whatsoever. And I've talked to some other people; they don't either. But Orban realized it wasn't time to take Hungary, and his peers, his actual peers, decided it's not time to start a civil war in Hungary or war in Europe just yet, right? Um, all of that was an assessment of the commitment to remain out of the EU's all out war with Russia plan and the US, by the way. Um, so Fourth Reich going public, right? Or, were the powers that be willing to lose one node, one positive solid node, and let that go and not start a fight over it? And there's a second one, which wasn't a positive node, but we had another assessment test of commitment in Syria last year. Were we willing to, were the Russians, were the Chinese, were we, the Americans, willing to go to war over Syria? Are we willing to go to war over Hungary yet? Yet. Maybe we are, but maybe not right now because there's other things we have to take care of, right? Like this self-funding, devil's legions, and that's oil primarily, and commodities and financial instruments and the markets and all that kind of stuff, all of which is getting dealt with. So you have to do that first, and then you have to try and rob Europe of natural resources necessary for them to rearm and have fuel and all of that. But you're as we look historically, and again, we can just go back to America. We don't need to look at the big world and all this. We can just look to the Civil War become a revolution that led to the United States of America. We're kind of in the early to mid 17 or late 1760s, early 1770s. If we look at the moves back and forth and all of that and all this assessment and all this aligning and all of this machinations and movings, and again, it wasn't just the colonials against the English crown, it was also the Dutch, it was also the French, the Russians, the Spaniard, all of them were all this. And we forget there was actually a world war going on at the time that right? So when we look at all that positioning is, kind of how we can say all of this collectively, it is accelerating. It is becoming more obvious, but it's not, it doesn't seem like it's going to culminate here in the next couple of years.
And to that point, the positioning, what is your assessment of? I feel like I know you're hosting this, but I feel like I'm the interviewer.
No,
um,
please. Yeah,
I love,
yeah, yeah.
um,
Okay.
what's your assessment of the lack of involvement of the Chinese and the Russians in Iran?
I don't think there is a lack of engagement or function there. I think what they're doing is keeping everybody out of it.
Right. That's what I meant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of people that had an expectation that that would have led to a confrontation. I guess what I'm asking is, what's your assessment of that not happening?
We are okay. So very much to something you said earlier, we are the true commitments are now being shown.
Yes.
The
Yes.
true commitment, at least particularly in the arc, but also all the other but again, where does your ultimate loyalty lie? At some point, It's not a matter of conversation and dialogue and diplomats and treaties. No, 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 no. At some point, somebody gets punched in the face real hard, maybe even knocked the hell out. And then we're looking immediately looking and go, okay, who's actually loyal to who? Who's really in this fight? Who really cares? Oh, actually, I saw a smirk on that guy's face, who was ostensibly that guy's buddy and was going to come to that guy's aid, but there's a smirk on his face. He's happy I knocked that motherfucker out, right?
Yes.
So true loyalty, true commitments to what, to who, under what conditions and under what terms, and within what bounds, that's all being worked out, not just at the nation state level, but realistically at a civilizational level, because we're at the point to where they've destroyed the state so much in virtually every state except for Russia that cleaned itself up and China that cleaned themselves up, and we're just starting. We are really at a clash of, we're finishing the English Civil War. We are at a civilizational fight that Russia and China don't want to be a part of. They've been caught up in it for 200 years. They don't want any part of it. But they also realize that we have to finish this fight ourselves, and they will, within the bounds of what they can do, keep others out of it. And they won't get involved because they know what getting involved in the English Civil War looks like. It gets you destroyed. Because turns out we still are the largest empire. The overall English-speaking peoples are still the largest empire, most powerful empire by far the world has ever seen across every dimension. And we need to remember that, because we are going to war with it. We are at war, and it's probably going hot here sometime pretty soon. Well, sometime in the next couple of years. And we need to remember. And the rest of the world knows, because that's all been directed towards them at some point, because they thought they could get involved and they could influence it in some way, and it destroyed them. Right?
That, that's what I find fascinating about this is, and that's the piece I think most people are not looking at. It's like, and I love your analogy of the bar fight. It's like walking in and knowing you're going to scan the room.
Yes.
And that's basically the analogy that I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
And
But you have to do it before, during, and after, because
yes.
what you scan is going to be different. Who you pick up, the dynamics before, during, and after. Yeah.
And that's what I feel like is unfolding right now.
Yes. Right now, my sense and take is why the Russian civilization and the Chinese civilization are being as neutral as they can. They're taking punches and they're taking blows, but they're staying as neutral as they can, is because they don't yet see the 7 to 10% of us that need to be fully committed to our throwing off this enslavement that goes back to the 1600s, to ending this civil war. They don't yet see the commitment amongst us. They're not waiting to see a plan.
And obviously, especially going back a couple of hundred years, the attempt to enslave them as well.
Well, that's what
They
we
have
sent
a vest,
communism in there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Terribly sorry. Yeah,
yes, they
yeah.
have a vested interest in making sure this is very successful.
Well, they either want to, like they themselves had to do, right? So give me 1 second. There is something very powerful amongst the actual noble warrior class. And that's universal. The noble warrior class is universal. It's Russians, the Chinese, the Persians, it's us, it's every culture, the Maasai in Africa, everybody has a noble warrior culture. Now, whether they're adhering to it writ large, etc., but it's still there. It's always there. The single most common powerful thread amongst that noble warrior class is the redemption. You must be given. Now, some people need to just be taken out because there's nothing redeemable about them, right? Like pedophiles and it's rapists and murderers, etc. They just be taken out. But for others, you always, and I'll put it in this way. I might or might not have known some Sicilian boys when I was in private school. Brothers. They might not have been brothers. No, anyways. Um, they had a code, right? And I knew their father and their uncles, and you know, um, they told me about a code, and it's actually it's been corroborated elsewhere, et cetera, right? Even through our world and our studies of them, et cetera. But they have a code. Even your enemy must be given the chance of escape. Now, it might not be easy to find, might be complicated, maybe ludicrously expensive and difficult, but even your staunchest enemy must be given the opportunity to back away from the fight honorably. And the reason is you never know when you're going to be the one that needs that out, right? So noble warrior cultures always allow for redemption. And so while we are still in our civil war, where we are literally we're fighting it out with the estrogenics over reality and over whether noble warrior culture is even necessary or an evil or absolutely necessary to fight evil, because that's really down underneath the penultimate of what we're fighting over. Um, there is no desire in the Russians and Chinese to destroy us, because we need to have the opportunity, one, because it destabilizes the whole world, but also because in their noble warrior culture, we need to be allowed the opportunity to redeem ourselves.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And that's what I see playing out, with the behind the scenes conversations in that's what I absolutely think is happening in Iran right now.
Mm,
Um that
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's why you see the little chart of the entire hierarchy of the Republican Guard with red X's on it and none of the army. They've
Well,
not taken out.
there was a hierarchy in the IRGC, and we didn't wipe them all out at once. We allowed some to
Right.
rise up, and then we talked with them, and then we were like, nope, you got to go too.
Exactly. It
Right?
has been, yes. And so I think this is so fascinating because this is exactly what's happening.
Correct.
Obviously,
Yes.
Venezuela
Yes. Yes.
took the
They took the option.
option. Yes.
Yes.
So, and again, I'm dumbfounded that people can't see this, because if you understand history, you can see it playing out right in front of us.
Yes. So this gets back to commitment, right? Noble warriors are
Yes.
committed to what? And that's the test. Are there any noble warriors remaining in that culture, in that people, in that community, in that family, whatever? If there are, though, there is one thing that we know about them that makes them noble warriors. Their loyalty and commitment is fundamentally, unswervably to their culture, their civilization. And what we're trying to hope is that the Persians still have noble warrior culture that can rise up and do the hard things. It's necessary. It's not easy, right? It wasn't easy for the Russians to restore themselves. It wasn't easy for the Chinese to restore themselves, right? But we are praying and hoping that this noble warrior culture in the Persian society will step forward and demonstrate the courage necessary, to your own mortal courage if necessary, to fight for your civilization. Not for the regime, not for Iran, but for Persia. Because if they step forward and do that, it stabilizes the entire region
Yes.
that's been part of this Persian influenced Farsi speaking, Farsi adjacent speaking, part of the world for thousands of years.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So, but we don't know if, and quite frankly, we don't know if because we got to deal with all that, you're right, so that our civil war isn't supported by people on the outside that can, for their own interests, their own agendas, et cetera, try to, participate in our finishing our civil war, which is what the American Revolution quite literally was. It was a civil war, and we haven't finished it yet. And we didn't finish the one in the 1800s either yet, right? Give me 1 second. We ourselves back to the question you asked earlier, the reason I didn't put this together till just now, so thank you so much for the questions, right? But the reason we're not seeing and I keep talking about civilization though, right? But reason we're not seeing the 7 to 10% full on, all in, committed amongst ourselves, and that's not just in America, but that's the English speaking people writ large, is because we fail to understand that what the answer to the question of do you need a noble warrior class has been definitively answered. Yes, or you end as a people.
Correct.
Quite literally. You get replaced in your own land by lesser people who are using systems, and that the only way they're going to get stopped is you force them to stop through force. This is what a noble warrior culture has always been about. So we don't have enough of our own people recognizing that we need our noble warrior class. And that's not just the tattooed up fighter guys, etc. It's people who really understand our history, our culture, our civilization, our culture and history and civilization in context of the other great cultures and civilizations in the world, and then our role and place in it as the defenders of that civilization. We are still all too caught up in our freaking banking accounts, going back to what you were saying about Bank of America.
Yeah.
Right? We thought that we could replace this noble warrior culture and ethos with financialism. And it doesn't work. And you can't do it.
And you see the psychological operations on our culture doing exactly that with the feminization of men. They have tried to culturally destroy us.
Yeah, it's not just the feminization of men, it's the skewing of everything to artificial jobs, fake jobs, to where women are now, making the most money on a pure basis. They're the ones 70% or 75% graduating from college. So they're the ones that are going to go into the big money. Now, there's the trades and other things, but there's not enough of those to offset the power of these institutions. So it's not just that, and it's not just, again, women into that. It's the estrogenic, so predatory males, effeminate
Yes.
males, right, et cetera. So give me 1 second. So it's not just the, attempt to diminutize noble warrior men and the few women that we have, and there are some, right? But it's to completely replace them in all of the wealth and recognition generating entities. So men just, for all intents and purposes, become subservient slaves. And I'm going to give you another culture and history that this happened to, and people really need to go back and look at it. And that's Sparta. Sparta was destroyed because it was literally a matriarchal society that turned their men into, predatory slaves and violent slaves. But it was the Spartan women, the Spartan queens, who had all the wealth and all the power. And they turned Sparta into very much what we're seeing here in our world.
Yeah, that's a great example.
And Sparta couldn't survive, no matter how capable the warrior men were. And they became less and less capable, right, over time. So and that whole thing is a part of the estrogenic psyop. We are taught that the Spartan men, Sparta, the greatest demonstration of manhood ever. No, it wasn't. It was the exact opposite.
That's amazing. The whole world's been turned upside down.
Yes. 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 It's this reality tunnel, this artificial reality tunnel. And it really, unfortunately, the printing press really, made it this creationist artificial reality tunnel much more capable and possible. But we need to remember that Europe had these ideological conceptual concept wars for centuries before there ever was a first American continent or a colony. And by the 1600s, that destruction of history, that destruction of old systems, old kingdoms, old principalities, old families, old all the old structures was pretty much done by the 1600s, such that the Peace of Westphalia was just please stop. And then they unleashed the War of the Roses in the United Kingdom, what would become the United Kingdom amongst our people, and that just nearly destroyed us. And then, to their credit, the Tudors stepped up and said, "Yeah, I'm not doing that," and that's an astounding thing. Um, Queen Elizabeth I fought her entire. People talk about, oh, female later. She had to fight and survive assassination attempts every minute of the day, her entire reign. She was under conflict the entire time, against the Catholics primarily, but power elites also trying to, etc. So by the time we get to Charles the First, even James the First, really, but by the time we get to Charles the First, we're so at war with ourselves that the king gets beheaded, and then Cromwell comes along, and we're just ripe, after that, just make it stop, make it stop. We'll put in place whatever. Let's try this other thing. Let's make it stop. Well, what helped support all of that? The printing press and the control of what pamphlets and what literature got pushed around. It was the new Bible, the King James Bible, and etc. This reality warping, this specific reality, artificial reality tunnel that we are all now coming to the collapse of, was put in place in the 1600s.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And now we're testing out, and the Chinese and the Russians are watching, is we are testing out whether we're going to try to sustain this artificial reality tunnel, this surreality, or we're going to go back to the older who and what we are. And there was something
But the
there.
current
Mhm.
reality is not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. It's so not real. Now, you want a prime example of how heavy they are investing in trying to resuscitate it and revitalize it for the next 400-year cycle. That's what the whole AI lie is about. The whole AI lie, and $70 trillion in wealth created, or 60 trillion or whatever, and this massive investment and push that I see every single day everywhere about talking about how brilliant AI is and what Claude's done and what's this and all that. 99.99% of all that is garbage. But what is it? It is the wealthiest, most powerful people in the current artificial reality tunnel saying, we got it. We now have enough computational brain power that we can fix all these problems. We can do all the same lies that got us to agree to the Inglorious Revolution and the Peace of Westphalia and all that so enslaved us. It's the same thing. They're trying to tell us, no, we know we destroyed you for 400 years. Totally get it. We were wrong. No, we weren't, but they were totally wrong. That we didn't understand all these things because we just didn't have access to enough information. We couldn't process it. But we're building 300 data centers, and we're building out, and these large language models are getting smarter every day, and we've got it worked out. Just trust us. Just hang on. Right? So what is our commitment? That's their agenda. That's literally to work on. Is keep the existing artificial reality tunnel going. It's not to change it. It's not to return sovereignty to people. It's to maintain their wealth, the wealth that they've stolen over the last 4 centuries. So what is our commitment to? Is it to this new artificial reality tunnel based off of how brilliant LLMs are, how brilliant AI is, and the lies that spin out of there? Or is it to our old ancient civilization that doesn't need any of that? It was 1,000 years old before any of that stuff was even thought of.
So there's you another action item.
Hmm.
If you're looking for things that you can do. I've been actually very amazed at the amount of resistance to these data
Yeah.
centers.
Yeah.
You see lots of things posted about entire towns coming to meetings and thwarting
Yeah.
the installation of data
Yeah.
centers. Because I really
Yeah.
think that's what people are looking for. They're looking for ways that they can show that commitment to pushing back on this tunnel, this
Yeah.
artificial reality tunnel. And
Yeah.
and I'm always looking for things that that you can empower people to do. Like obviously taking care of yourself, and um, communicating with your neighbors and doing all of that stuff, which has basically been um, there's been a conscious effort to make sure that we don't do that with your cell phones and all of this other stuff. And I think AI is just another one of those quantum leaps forward to isolate people and continue to try to perpetuate this. I agree. I think most of this is it, what would it be too much to say that they now see the wealth transfer from the whole green climate agenda collapsing, and this is the next one?
That's part of it. That's the financialist behind it. But the elite system, the cabal of elites want to maintain this illusionary world that's been created, this return on capital world, right? This derivatized reality, this derivatized world, because they thrive in that.
Right.
Humanity doesn't, but they thrive in that artificial autist-led freaking world because that's really what it
That's
is.
what
It's
I
a,
thought the whole
yeah,
green agenda was all about. It's a basic wealth transfer.
yes, but
It
that's
was a
for the
fake world too.
yeah, no, it's
The
true,
entire
totally
thing
true. But
was
that's the
fake.
bureaucrats. But that's for the bureaucratic class, and these folks would still be supporting that too if the lie of it functioning could still continue. So now they're
Right. They
transitioning
would
to the
support
lie
it.
of AI. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
They'd
to
still
me,
be
it's
all
just
for it.
like, and before that, we had the whole um well, I don't know, there's been like three or four things, but I just see that like every 10 to 20 years there's this new crisis. The whole earth is going to die. So we have to pour trillions of dollars, and they have the financial system already
Yeah,
set up for
yeah,
that agenda to
yes,
make them wealthy and us
yeah.
poor.
But
And to
this,
me,
mhm.
this AI thing is just another one of those iterations where they already have the infrastructure that they're going to get rich and we're going to be poor.
So that's part of it, but that's only to sustain real power. Money is not power. Real power is that enough of the population believes that you have superior information and you have superior knowledge and you have superior, because of that you have relationships with other people who possess these superior things.
That makes sense.
99.999% of the time none of that's real. It's the perception. I call it the great deception. So the reason they're investing so heavily in AI and LLMs particularly is we are linguistic based creatures. And that is the ultimate capacity to manipulate every aspect of our reality. And it is all trained and programmed on the existing artificial reality tunnel. It is the master. So what they're doing is they're using the financial mechanism you're talking about to pay for it, to sustain it, to get us all to buy into it. But in
Right.
reality, what they're trying to do is they're trying to re-legitimize this artificial reality tunnel that we've had for the last 400 years.
That makes a lot more sense.
And
Yeah.
now, to your earlier question, they are testing our resolve, our commitment to this artificial world or to humanity, to ourselves as a sovereign, independent individual, self sufficient, because you can't be sovereign if you're not self sufficient. That takes effort. Doesn't mean you can do everything yourself, but self sufficiency also means that I have relationships with people that I curate and that I work and I maintain that can provide for things that I can't, and then I can provide for things that they can't. Right? That's still self sufficiency. It's not going out and living in the mountains and all of that, like part of my youth. But now I kind of miss it. Right? I didn't as a kid.
But that's the importance of the networks.
Yes. Yeah.
That was kind of a joke when I first met my husband, is that you would never starve because he's an electrical contractor. He has
Yeah.
skills that
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
always in demand.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that they want to get us away from, because that ensures our sovereignty.
Correct.
You can
Correct.
always sustain yourself if you have, your buddy that's the HVAC guy, your real, you know, fundamental capabilities, is what liberates us. That we're not on the, and that's kind of another funny story. Um, and you'll appreciate this because my husband, who was a business owner, he bought the business from his dad when he was like 25 years old. And he worked sometimes he didn't take a paycheck because he had like 100
Yeah.
electricians working for him.
Yeah.
And his life was completely different than mine. And so when we first met, it was like he could not comprehend that I got a paycheck every month.
Yeah.
He's like, "You don't do anything?" "No, it just shows up." "What?" And he literally couldn't believe me. So
Yeah.
we after a few years, he was like, I what happens when the government cuts you off?" And I looked at him and I'm like, "They're not going to cut me off." And he goes, "What if they do? You don't have anything else."
Yeah.
And
No
so,
fallback. Yeah.
yeah, he went back and, his commitment was we were going to go buy real estate, and we were going to have rental property because he does not trust the government that much. And that is the ultimate, to your point, the noble warriors. He does not want to be tethered to anything. He wants us to have our capabilities here and be sovereign and be in control of our future. And, I look back on it because I thought he was crazy. I'm like, I'm a veteran. They're not going to cut me off.
Yeah.
But that was just such a foreign concept to him, that he was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that.
The unfortunate thing there is they could have just rolled in and taken your properties from you too. So you got to build out security and capabilities and other
Yeah.
things. And yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh, we do.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But his whole
yeah,
point was he did not want us tethered to
yeah.
the federal government.
To the artificial
And
reality, to this artificial construct.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You need. So I've said this for decades now. The only power, real power, is mutually dependent, multi-generational relationships. That is the only real power, and that is what they are terrified of. And so they are
yes,
distracting us with everything that they can. They're trying to blind us with science. Remember the old Thomas Dolby song, right, from the 80s? um, what they are trying to do is, excuse me, impress upon us that the machines are now smart enough that they're going to solve all of our problems. And we don't need to work together and come together and solve problems ourselves and build networks ourselves locally and be, individually sovereign locally. Because the only real sovereignty is local. There is no sovereignty on some illusionary national or international stage. The only real sovereignty is sovereignty that you can defend, and that's local, right? Over resources and food and shelter and all the other things that you can, provide for yourself. And so they're doing, excuse me, everything they can to convince us that they are bringing down the old artificial reality tunnel, and they've got smart machines that are going to be able to put in place a far better system that doesn't have the abuses. The very fact that you're lying to us about the capabilities of the machines invalidates everything you just tried to articulate to us, right? It's just,
and your mouth's fly.
yeah, exactly. It's like you just realize you accept that we can't allow the parasites to take any more because it's killing the host, but you still like the host and you pretty much want to keep the host. To such a degree, you've invented this concept and idea that you spend trillions a year trying to convince us works. That's even real, that even exist. And you do it, excuse me a second, you do it with magic, right? Because what is every I can't remember the exact phrase, and even Elon's been on Twitter here in the last couple of days saying this, but every every sufficiently sophisticated technology is beyond the reach of the majority to understand is magic.
Yeah. So I just had this conversation with my daughter
Mm.
about AI, and I I asked her. I said, "So, do you think it's good or do you think it's bad?" And she said, "Well, I'm not sure." And I said, "Well, let me say this. What do you think they're feeding AI? Because AI is not organically anything. It is fed information." And I said, "And over the last 3 years, I have revealed to you that literally 6 different degrees, and every single degree that I have isn't worth the frame that I paid for to put the degree in, because all of the information that I learned, to include all of my professional military education, is a lie." And so they are taking that lie and feeding it into a machine. And because the machine is going to tell you, somehow you think it's not a lie.
Well, and the machine will even tell you, the machine will tell you the sins of the father, but in the construct of the world the father lived in. So, so give me 1 second. It is exactly what I articulated. One of the things, and to the question you asked earlier, they are testing our commitment. And this is even the good, the quote unquote white hats on our side. They're not trying to replace the regime. They're just trying to clean up some of the graft and the corruption, and they're trying to make it economically viable and sustainable. What they are doing is they're investing and knowingly investing vast fortunes in making us believe that this machine is now smart enough and honest enough and knows enough and can understand enough that when we ask it a question, it's telling us the truth. Because if that's not true, and we don't all buy into that, or a substantive number of us buy into that, the whole thing collapses. The whole lot, and for no other, well, for many reasons, but primarily because there's something like 60 or 70 trillion dollars of wealth based off of that. And it's all fake. It's all fake. It's the .com era that I lived through and went through times 100. So what is our commitment to? And this is going to accelerate because things are coming out, they're investing. Every time some lead technology person has been in AI for 40 years comes out and says this is BS, they quadruple the investment for the next 3 weeks of telling us, some wild story about how some AI broke containment. That's one set of stories. And this AI solved this complex mathematical thing that nobody's been able, or physics thing that nobody's, or some other thing that when you actually go and test it, it's like, yeah, no, actually that didn't happen. And that's not even actually possible.
There has been
Right?
several people that come out and say that the entire thing's bullshit.
Beep, beep, beep. Quantum computing too. Yeah. So, and then they've got other things they're talking about, quantum computing and AI are talking to interdimensional beings in the quantum field. And I no dead serious, with very high end videos that are created on YouTube. And so, again, the 13 storylines, they're plugging all of them, all the archetypes and all this, they got it going, right? So, what is our commitment to? Is our commitment to this techno utopia lie that has always been a lie? Is our commitment to one another and to our civilization? And if it's to our civilization, well, then no, our civilization was 1,000+ years old before we had the first frickin' steam engine, much less computers and AI gods and all this other stuff. Our civilization survived invasions, survived internal conflicts, survived climate changes, dark ages. Our civilization was over 1,000 years old before the very first steam engine was invented. Do we really need all this stuff? And is it helping? So, to the power struggle stuff, yes, our commitment to is being tested. And again, the Russians and the Chinese are standing by and they're testing us. right? To see if we get the resolve to our civilization like they did, which is what allowed them to survive what we did to them. And they're waiting to see. But if we, back to the, main theme of the conversation, if we keep thinking that any of this is going to happen, if it is because there's some master plan, or that you could even plan it all and do this, they will win, because we need to commit to something, and there's only one thing we can commit to, is a big, disparate group of all kinds of different peoples, etc., and that's our civilization. And when I say our civilization, I don't mean Roman civilization, which is European civilization. I mean America, or English civilization, of which America is the dominant force.
Excellent.
Yeah. Should we leave it there?
Yeah.
All right.